In a normal year, a Week 2 matchup between Texas and Alabama would sound like one of the biggest games of the season. These are two of college football's biggest brands. They both have plenty of legendary players, coaches, and victories to their name, and when they last faced off in 2010, they were competing for a national championship. In 2022, though, things felt a little bit different. Alabama was ranked number 1 in the country, they'd just come off of a national championship appearance, and they returned a Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback. Meanwhile, Texas had finished 2021 with a 5-7 record and one of the worst defenses in the country. This meant that, in spite of all the history that these two programs have, Alabama was favored to win by 20 points, and most people seemed to think that the game was over before it even started. In spite of all the potential for a Hollywood-style upset here, the predictable thing ultimately happened. Alabama won the game, and the Heisman Trophy winner led a last-minute field goal drive, personally willing his team to victory. Along the way, though, Texas showed plenty of signs that they do deserve to be back in the national conversation, and, most importantly, that their defense isn't the doormat that it was just a year ago. In this video, we'll break down the back and forth between that defense and Alabama's offense, looking both at how the Longhorns held the Crimson Tide in check for 3 quarters, and at how Alabama got it together just in time to impose their will in the end. Let's start this study with a look at some broad stats. In this game, Alabama threw the ball 39 times and ran it only 24, and this might be a surprise if you were just looking at the box score, especially since this was a one-score game from start to finish, and Alabama was averaging 6.7 yards per rush on the ground. Dig a little deeper, though, and we see that those numbers are brought up significantly by one touchdown run at the end of the first quarter. Alabama's leading rusher, Jace McClellan, gained an absurd 97 yards on just 6 carries in this game, but 81 of those yards came on that one run. Outside of that touchdown, Tidebacks averaged less than 3 yards per carry, and so two of the big questions that we'll want to answer in this video are, why did Alabama struggle to run the ball for most of the game, and how did that fact impact each team's strategy? Let's start by looking at what the Crimson Tide wanted to do on the ground by breaking down that long touchdown itself. All else being equal, when Alabama ran the ball, they wanted to use a pretty typical RPO-based rushing attack, and that's what we're seeing right here, where they're pairing an outside zone run to the right, with a quick screen from the wide receiver down at the bottom of the frame. Now when you see this, you might be wondering, if your goal is to run the ball, then why are you giving your quarterback the option to pull it and throw instead? Well, like most offenses nowadays, the Tide do this kind of thing because it gives their quarterback answers against a variety of looks. For example, let's check out the pre-snap matchup on this play. On the offensive side of the ball, Alabama's in their base 11 personnel package, meaning that they have 1 running back and 1 tight end on the field, along with 3 wide receivers split out wide. The key here is that in the box, that tight end combines with their 5 offensive linemen to give them 6 run blockers total. When we look at how Texas is lining up against this formation, though, there's a potential problem. Bama may have 6 blockers, but there are 7 Longhorns who could potentially get into the run fit. In particular, if we look at this linebacker down here at the bottom of the screen, it looks like that guy could either stay where he is, sitting wide and playing in coverage over the 2 receivers at the bottom of the screen, or he could jump down into the box at the last minute to become a 7th run defender, giving the defense one more guy than the offense can block. Obviously, before the snap, the offense doesn't know which of these things is going to happen, and so the RPO is designed to read that guy and make him wrong no matter what he does. After the snap, we see quarterback Bryce Young looking right at that linebacker for his read. That defender's not chasing the run here, and so Young hands it off, knowing that his guys will be able to block everybody that's in the box. So those are the numbers, and there's a lot more that you could say about this play, but in the interest of time, I'm going to limit it to 2 quick points that'll be important in my discussion of other plays. First of all, I want to emphasize the role that the tight end is going to play in opening up the lane here. This play is going to aim off tackle, and before the snap, Texas has a nickelback lined up outside with a good amount of width over that tight end, so that defender is going to be responsible for setting the edge and forcing the ball back inside. After the snap, though, Bama's going to use their tight end to arc out and drive that guy out toward the sidelines, using his width against him to widen him and create the right edge of this off-tackle lane. The other point that I want to make is that although this play is an RPO, it is not a zone read. The quarterback has the option to either hand the ball off or to throw the screen, but the play is not set up for him to keep it for himself, and this ends up being a second critical detail. If the run portion of this play were a zone read, then the offense would be leaving this backside defensive end unblocked, and the quarterback would be reading him, keeping the ball if he crashes down to defend the run. In this way, the quarterback's read essentially blocks that defender or prevents him from diving down to the inside. Because this isn't a zone read, though, the Tide want to find another way to account for that defensive end. We know that the tight end gives Bama 6 guys in the box, and so to the play side, the center, right guard, right tackle, and tight end are going to zone block and work to these 4 play side defenders. That's going to leave the left guard and left tackle to man block the two remaining backside defenders, putting them each in a one-on-one situation. As the game wore on, these backside one-on-ones became problematic, so let's now take a look at how that impacted each team's strategy. This play is going to be another RPO, this time with a run working to the left, and as we break it down, let's keep an eye on those man blocks on the backside. After the snap, we're going to see Alabama setting up another screen to the backside of this run, with the slot receiver to the right side of the formation running a quick screen. This time, they want to get their tight end out on the edge as an extra blocker for that guy, and they're going to motion him into and then out of the box to see how the defense reacts. We can see right here that as that tight end works his way back out to the perimeter, the linebacker that's playing over him widens out of the box with him. This gives Texas 4 defenders over 3 receivers to the screen side of this play, and so Young's read is going to take him away from that option. When that linebacker leaves the box to stay with the tight end, however, it leaves the Longhorns with just 5 defenders in the front, and so Alabama's offensive line will be able to get a blocker on each of them. Again, though, we have to remember how Bama's blocking those 5 guys. There's no zone read element here, and so as we saw in the last play, the center, play side guard, and play side tackle are going to zone block, working toward the 3 play side defenders. That's then going to leave the right guard and right tackle to man block their defensive lineman on the backside, and to see how this goes, we're going to keep an eye specifically on the block of the right guard. After the snap, we see him soloed up on his defender, and frankly, it doesn't go very well. That defender's able to latch onto his shoulder pads and lock out his arms, effectively giving him control of that blocker. As the running back looks to cut back, that defensive tackle then sheds the guard and falls inside, startles the running back into slipping, and then swallows him up to complete the tackle. As offensive coordinator Bill O'Brien, when you're struggling to block one-on-one like this, then you need to find ways to change up your backside blocking to get your guys some help. And we'll see one of the ways that he did that here, where they're again running an RPO with a zone run to the left, and then motioning one of their split backs out to the backside to run a swing pass for the pass option of this play. The most meaningful change, though, is in what O'Brien's doing with his tight end. On the long touchdown run, that guy was a play side blocker, arcing out to take on Texas's force player and create an off-tackle lane, and we saw that block played a huge part in opening up the edge for Bama's long touchdown run. In contrast, on this play, he's lined up as a backside blocker. When you put him in this alignment, he won't be any use in opening up the play side edge for you, but what he can do is take over the block on the backside defensive end, which had been the responsibility of an offensive tackle on the last 2 plays that we studied. When the tight end can block that backside edge, it frees up the right tackle to combo block with the right guard. On a combo block like this, those 2 linemen will work a double team on the defensive tackle. Then, once they've got that guy under control, one of them will slide off to block the linebacker that's stacked behind him. Even with this double team, though, Texas's defensive tackle is too physical for Alabama's O-line. If we look at where he is before the snap, we see that he's lined up a yard or 2 inside of the left hash. When the right guard and right tackle work to double team him, he really doesn't move at all. He just digs in and stays exactly where he is, making it hard for either of those linemen on that combo block to leave the double team. This is then going to buy time for that linebacker that's playing behind him. With the defensive tackle protecting that guy, he's able to bounce and patiently read the play, and when the running back commits to a lane, he's free to trigger and fill that hole. Of course, if the run game isn't working, then one answer might be to go to the passing game, but Texas's defensive line maintained their edge in physicality and execution in this phase as well. Here we see an obvious passing down on 3rd and 17, and Texas is about to get 2 defenders with a shot at the quarterback while bringing just a 4-man rush. To do this, they're loading up a little bit to the center's right here, where they have a defensive tackle playing heads up over the center, and then 3 more guys lined up over the right guard and right tackle, giving them 1 more defender than those guys can block. Meanwhile, up at the top of the screen, they have just 2 defenders lined up over the left tackle and left guard. To make sure that they can get enough blockers to that overloaded side, Alabama's going to slide their line to the right. So the center is going to slide over to become a 3rd blocker for the 3 field side defenders. And the left guard is going to come over to replace the center's block on the nose tackle. The tight will then be blocking man-to-man on the backside, with the left tackle blocking the defensive tackle that Texas has brought over as an edge rusher here, while the running back accounts for the linebacker with a check release, where he'll stay in to block if that guy blitzes, but will run a check down if he stays in coverage as he does on this play. So that's the protection scheme, but again, because of Texas's superior physicality and execution along the line, they're going to defeat it easily. First, we'll keep an eye on the left tackle who's blocking his edge defender man-to-man up at the top of the screen. After the snap, that defensive tackle simply beats him with an inside move, hurrying Young and forcing him to get rid of the ball earlier than he would have liked. To the slide side, things didn't go much better. Remember that to this side, the center, right guard, and right tackle are all sliding to the right to give the offense 3 blockers for 3 defenders. The key here is that in a slide protection like this, those blockers are not taking their defenders man-to-man. Instead, they're each blocking their outside gap, or the gap to their right in this case, and the idea here is that this will make it easier to pick up stunts and blitzes. For example, we can imagine a blitz where Texas takes their 2 defensive linemen and stunts them down inside, while the linebacker behind them wraps around to blitz off the edge. In a slide protection like this, the offensive line's first responsibility is to a gap, not to a man, and so against this blitz, the right tackle would slide over to pick up the blitzing linebacker, and the center and right guard would slide to pick up the stunting defensive lineman. Understanding these assignments will make it easier to see what went wrong on this play. After the snap, we see those 3 blockers sliding to the right, and again, they're looking for threats to their outside gap, not for specific defenders. If you're the right guard here, then that means that you have to have awareness on the defensive end on the outside, because if that guy stunts down inside toward you, then you have to block him. Meanwhile, the center's doing the same thing, with eyes on the stand-up defensive end that Texas has moved down inside. If that guy stunts down to attack the center, then he has to pick him up. As we advance it a little bit further, we can see that the edge defender here actually is angling down inside, and so that's going to hold the attention of the right guard, and then that's going to leave the center all alone to pick up the stand-up defender on the inside. On this play, he doesn't get across effectively enough to cut that guy off, and so he's able to shoot into the backfield, getting to Young at almost exactly the same time as the defensive tackle coming from the opposite edge. Of course, an important fact here is that Texas was able to create 2 breakdowns in Alabama's protection scheme by rushing just 4 defensive linemen. They didn't have to bring anybody on a blitz to get this pressure, and so in coverage, the Horns were able to play with a safety over the top to each side of the field, and throughout the second and third quarters, this, combined with the pressure from their D-line, had a serious impact on Alabama's ability to throw the ball. In the perimeter screen game, part of the issue was that, again, Texas's defense was more physical and did a great job of shedding their blockers. On this play, Bama's emptying out the backfield, and they're going to try to throw a quick screen to this receiver up at the top of the screen. Texas, as they did for much of the game, is playing with a deep safety to each side of the field, and so pre-snap this gives them a cornerback, a linebacker, and a safety over the 2 receivers to this side. To try and gain an advantage, Alabama's going to motion their tight end over, and this is going to give him 1 more man to block for the screen. The idea here is that he'll be able to fire out and block Texas's cornerback, and the second wide receiver is going to work inside to crack the linebacker. This should isolate the screen receiver one-on-one against the deep safety, who's going to have to come down from depth if he's going to make this tackle. This is going to get blown up, though, because Texas's secondary is going to show the same advantage in physicality that their D-line did. The key here will be Alabama's 6'5", 244-pound tight end, who's trying to block Texas's 6'3", 206-pound cornerback. As the tight end works out to block that guy, the corner just grabs him by the shoulders and throws him to the side before coming up immediately to tackle the ball carrier. And it wasn't just that cornerback who was making a difference out there on the edge. On this play, we'll see a screen to this slot receiver up at the top of the screen. This is a 3rd and 2, so Bama's trying to run an RPO to pick up the first down, but when the quarterback throws it out to that guy, he immediately gets swarmed by the nickelback and the field safety. So far, we've seen that Alabama struggled to run the ball and to throw screens, and when you combine these 2 things, it really takes their RPO attack completely off the table. This brings us to the last major problem. In the downfield passing game, Alabama's need to protect the passer often led them into a downfield passing game that had no chance of success against the split safety coverages that Texas had settled into. For example, here we're looking at a 1st and 10, and we can already see those safeties lining up 14 yards off the ball. Alabama wants to throw downfield here, but they also need some extra help to stop Texas's pass rush, and so they're going with a 7-man protection. To the right side, they've got their tight end lined up on the wing, and that guy's going to end up in a double team with the right tackle against the defensive end that's lined up over them. To block the other defensive end, they're doing something a little bit interesting. Normally, we'd expect the left tackle to block that guy, but on this play, Alabama's actually going to take their right guard and pull him across the formation to kick him out. This kind of mimics the blocking of a power run play, but the real benefit on this particular play is that when you make that pulling guard responsible for the defensive end, you allow the left tackle to block back, working with the left guard to get a double team on the defensive tackle to this side. To get a 7th man in this protection, they're then using their running back on a check release, so he's going to sit, check for blitzers, and then run a check down if nobody shows. Here, on the way out of the backfield, we see him giving a little bit of help to his left tackle by chipping a defensive lineman who'd looped across from the other side of the formation. At this point in the video, we can understand why Alabama needs to do all of this, but it's also creating a problem for them. In this protection, the Tide are only going to have 3 wide receivers out in the pattern, and all of those guys are releasing vertically. Without all 22 footage, we can't see the exact route combination, but we can at least see that all 3 of those guys are pushing deeper than 10 yards. The problem here is that Texas is sitting in that split safety coverage, and so when those 3 receivers go vertical, you're going to get an inside-outside bracket with the cornerback and safety over the 2 receivers at the top of the screen, and then a 2-on-1 bracket with a safety and a cornerback over the single receiver at the bottom of the screen. And whatever those guys are doing when they go out of frame, it's clearly not effective enough for Young to pull the trigger on any of those routes. The other problem with releasing all of those guys vertically is that whatever they were doing with those vertical releases, they were never able to threaten the linebackers and nickelback who were sitting in underneath coverage. This meant that those defenders were free to sit and read the quarterback without having to worry about anything coming behind them, and so when Young ultimately comes back to the running back on the check down, it gets smothered immediately by those underneath defenders. By the 4th quarter, though, Alabama found a solution that allowed them to gain 199 yards and score 10 points, all while calling passes 75% of the time. This solution, in a nutshell, was to forget about that max protect vertical passing game and to release everybody out into the pattern, using their quick passing game to avoid Texas's deep defenders and to overload the underneath coverage. We'll see a good example of that right here. On this play, Alabama's not even pretending to threaten the run, going with an empty backfield and putting 3 receiving threats to the left and 2 to the right. Texas is going to counter this by bringing their typical 4-man rush and then playing the kind of split safety coverage that we've seen elsewhere in this video. The basic passing structure that we're going to see here is called a middle triangle read, where the Tide are going to use 3 receivers to outnumber Texas's 2 linebackers in the middle of the field. To the left, they've got a tight end lined up as the number 3 receiver on the inside, and he's going to threaten the linebacker who's playing over him by running a stick route to the outside, creating 1 point in that 3 receiver triangle. The linebacker's going to stay with that guy here, and so that's going to eliminate both of those players, allowing the Tide to then attack the weak side linebacker with the 2 stacked receivers up at the top of the screen, with those 2 guys creating the other 2 points of the triangle. First, the receiver on the ball is going to run a slant, pushing vertically for 3 steps before breaking behind that linebacker and into the middle of the field, creating the top point of the triangle. Critically, this route's going to take him away from the cornerback, who's playing high and outside, and underneath of the deep safety, so neither of those guys is going to be a factor here. With that slant route attacking the linebacker vertically and inside, they're then going to use their second receiver to attack him shallow and outside, running that receiver on a little hitch 3 yards past the line of scrimmage, and we can see the 2-on-1 stretch that this creates, with the linebacker caught in the middle of 2 routes that are pulling him in opposite directions. On this play, he's going to sit outside for the hitch, and so the quarterback's just going to take that quick throw on the slant, which is out of his hand before Texas's pass rush can become a problem. As the 4th quarter wore on and Alabama started to hit more and more of these quick passing plays, Texas had to come out of their too high shell, and at that point things opened up a little bit in the passing game. Here we've got a 2nd and 2, with Alabama putting 3 receiving threats to the right side of the formation, and a single receiver to the opposite side, along with a running back who's offset in the shotgun. Texas is in their base 4-2-5, and they're creating a 6-man pressure by bringing both of their linebackers on a blitz. When those guys come, though, they need someone to cover the tight end to the right side of the formation, and so they're going to spin to a single high look, dropping their field safety down to pick up the tight end, while the boundary safety drops back to defend the deep middle. This structure creates a problem, though. If we go back to the pre-snap look and think about the boundary safety bailing while both linebackers blitz, then the big question becomes who's going to cover the running back if he releases into the pattern. The answer for Texas is that they're asking their defensive end to play something called a peel technique, and this means that that guy's going to be part of the rush if the running back stays into block, but if the running back instead releases, then the defensive end's going to peel off and cover him. The bad news for Texas here is that this is a pretty bad athletic mismatch, and the Tide are releasing that running back on a V route, where he'll break outside just long enough to clear the offensive tackle, before breaking it back inside into the space that's being vacated by those blitzing linebackers. On this play, we'll again see the offense putting 3 receiving threats to one side, and then having a single wide receiver and offset running back to the other. This time, to attack this formation, the Longhorns are running something that they tried a few times in this game. Up at the top of the screen, they're bringing their cornerback on a blitz off the edge, and then they're rolling their boundary safety over the top to pick up coverage on the single receiver. Once again, though, the question arises. If the cornerback is blitzing and the safety's taking the wide receiver, then how do you cover the running back if he releases? To handle that possibility, Texas is running something called a green dog blitz with the linebacker to this side. This is basically a read blitz, where the linebacker is going to watch the running back and cover him on any route that he might run out of the backfield. Unlike the last play, though, the running back does not have a free release here. At this point in the game, Alabama's seen a couple of cornerback blitzes like this one, and so they're asking their running back to dual read from the linebacker out to the cornerback. That means that after the snap, we see the running back size scanning up to the linebacker first because that guy's got the shortest path to the quarterback and so is the most immediate rush threat. Instead of blitzing, though, that linebacker's apparently sitting in coverage, and so the running back turns his head and scans out to the cornerback. The cornerback is blitzing here, and so the running back works to the edge and blocks him. We can remember, though, that the linebacker to this side isn't totally out of the rush because he's running that green dog blitz off of the action of the running back. So, when the back stays in to block the cornerback, the linebacker blitzes straight through his gap and actually gets a free run at the quarterback, hitting him just after he throws. This has another consequence, though, because when that linebacker blitzes, he clears out the middle of the field to the side, and on this play, Bama's attacking exactly that area with a single receiver who's running a dig route over the middle. We'll remember that that guy's being covered by the boundary safety over the top, and so when the cornerback to this side blitzes, that safety has to work outside and over the top of him to pick up any vertical route. As he does this, he gets his hips turned toward the sideline, and this creates an opening for that receiver to break underneath and inside of him, where he's got a little bit of room to run in the middle of the field after the catch. Of course, in addition to these nice gains in the passing game, the Tide also got a few clutch scrambles from their Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, as we'll see on this unforgettable play that combines the last 2 plays that we've studied. On defense, Texas is running that same cornerback blitz from the top of the screen, so that means that with the cornerback blitzing, they're bringing the boundary safety over the top to pick up the single receiver, and then they're green dogging the linebacker to make sure that they have coverage on the running back. Unlike the last play, though, the running back is not dual reading here, and so he's not going to pick up the cornerback's blitz. Instead, he's got one of those free releases on a V route that we saw 2 plays ago where he burned Texas' defensive end. On a free release, the running back has no protection responsibility, and so after the snap, he gets out into the pattern immediately. When he does this, that green dogging linebacker sees it, and so he's going to pick him up in coverage. This has the inadvertent effect of pulling that defender away from the sideline, though, toward the middle of the field as he works to carry the running back. With the running back out of the protection, though, nobody's left to pick up the blitzing cornerback, and so Young has to pull a rabbit out of his hat, seeing the pressure, stepping up and out of it, and breaking contain to the right. Finally, we'll also remember that the safety to this side is covering the single receiver who happens to be running vertical on this play to clear out space for the running back's V route, and in this case, that has the effect of running that safety away from Young's scramble. When Young gets away from the cornerback, therefore, the linebacker and safety are both gone, and there are no other defenders left on the perimeter. He's able to take off for a 19-yard scramble, and this puts the Tide definitively in range to kick the game-winning field goal.